Hello everybody. I'm very glad that I can be here today and tell you more about ArangoDB 3.10. It's our new release what became GA today, and I'm very excited to give you a little bit an overview about the highlights what this new release brings. Let me quickly introduce myself. So my name is Claudius Weinberger. I'm the CPO, COO and one of the co-founders of ArangoDB. So I'm doing this adventure already for a few years. I think it's around 8 years now. And that makes me even more excited to tell you more about this release at our first summit. And it's great to have this summit and all you attending to it today. That is really a great story and a great news for us. Let us start here with an overview. So I will tell you about the new features, some improvements, and also performance and usability related new features. I will walk you through most of the new features in a little bit more detail now in the next minutes. And I will give you also, let's say, a very brief understanding what the other features are meaning and what they are doing. And hopefully you're getting also very excited about this new release as we are. But let me first explain quickly what we had in mind as we started or put together this release. So first of all, we wanted to improve the graph-related features in ArangoDB. So with that, we have Enterprise Graph, a complete new feature, a new way to shard a graph in a sharded environment, a distributed database, a real one. We have Arango Search v2, what is maybe not directly, obviously, why it's related to graph. I will explain that in a second. And we have a locality sensitive hashing, for example. That's also very important if you're in the space of entity resolution in the direction of knowledge graph. But also graph refactoring is an important point, what I will explain at the end. The other topic what we had in mind was usability. Usability at scale. So it's really graph, enterprise graph is a main point here, but also the other features like M1 ARM support makes it simply easier to run on this platform, much easier as it was in the past, or even enables you to use it there. Also, the rebalancing improvements are very important for the daily work with ArangoDB. I will also give you a very brief overview about that at the end of the talk. But let's start with the most important features of 3.10, and that is the enterprise graph. It's a new type of sharded graph, so a way where you can distribute a graph over multiple nodes in a very natural fashion. So you have not to think about how to do it. You have not to think about how you read this graph. It simply happens completely transparent for you in ArangoDB. It's similar to our existing smart graph feature, what is heavily used and one of our most important features what we have ever built, because it is the one what enables people to run a graph in a sharded distributed environment. But what was needed in the past is that you know the sharding attribute. So what exactly is the attribute, the data in your graph, maybe a country, something what you know what make this graph more or less connected. Not completely, but more or less. Now with enterprise graph, this is simply not needed anymore. You just import your data. We take care about that the data is distributed in a good fashion, and you get a much better read performance as you get it from any other distributed graph, also from our own community edition. And therefore, we have also a very easy migration path to if you're coming from ArangoDB community to ArangoDB Enterprise. The next one is Arango Search v2. I already mentioned that at the beginning. It's not directly, obviously, why that is so important, but we implemented Arango Search already very early on, I think 6 years ago, if I remember correctly. It's a fully integrated full-text search information retrieval engine in the core of ArangoDB, fully supported by our query language. But we started to work at the beginning with so-called Arango Search views. That enables you to have let's say, your search view on top of multiple collections in ArangoDB. Maybe you know that already. You can split a graph in ArangoDB in multiple collections so that you can easily have control about, do you want to look at the whole graph or only a part of the graph? And with that, you could really manage the same with Arango Search. Now we're adding or inventing a new way that you can also use this inverted indices on the collection levels. What enables what we are enabling with that is that we can integrate that even better in our query language AQL. So you can think about a graph traversals where you maybe hitting a node or multiple nodes, and you have to filter them on multiple attributes on the same time. In the past, if you have one index, it's on one attribute, then you have to make a tough decision potentially. Now you can have the index on multiple attributes and using it to filter out the nodes, what is important to go further with your graph traversals. We also improved the handling of Arango search views, so that becomes even much easier and more convenient with ArangoDB Search 2. The other very important feature is the read from followers. So that's really enabling you to have a higher throughput in your database. What it simply is doing, followers is in our understandings a replica of your data. So you have your first copy of your data, what we call the leader shard, and you have the replicas from them, what we are calling the follower shards. With this feature, you can also read from the follower shards. You're enabling that per an option parameter for every query. So you have the full control if you want to use it just maybe for one query or part of your applications or for the full application. You really can run very mixed workloads here. What we are doing in the past is that we are making sure that you're reading only for a leader shard what is in sync. That gives you not 100% guarantee that you not have so-called dirty reads. You can still have them, but you're minimizing that to a lowest possible amount, but you're getting the better throughput. That is a trade-off what is for many applications something what makes a lot of sense. The next one, what I would like to speak a little bit more about is the computed values. It sounds maybe on the first hand as a very simple feature. What it's doing is, on the first hand, very simple. You can define a new value or new attribute in your JSON document. You can express a definition by AQL what should happen to this attribute on writing time. You can make even the differentiation between update, replace, insert, because there are different use cases where you really can benefit from that. But let's start with a very simple example. So you have a last name, you have a first name or last name, and you want to have the full name in your JSON attribute because you need it maybe some reason for indexing or for just showing that on your application level. So that can be done very easily. But you can also do much more complicated calculations. Maybe a value is over a certain amount, then adding a new attribute with the value 2 to your JSON document so that you can build indices what can really benefit from that and be much faster to integrate later on a query level. We are doing that at the moment at write time with 3.10. We will also add later on with new releases the capabilities that you do these computations only on index level or at read time. So that also opens new use cases simply for read time if you don't need to have that written to your data, if you don't want to spend more memory and disk space. And you can do it on index level if you even don't only want to use it for an index. So that is really a big benefit what's coming later. And we're happy to have this computed value now finally in ArangoDB 3.10. The next one I would explain a little bit more is the locality sensitive hashing. If you're in the space of entity resolution or more or less a knowledge graph where you have, let's say, data coming from different sources where you have to find duplicates or even stuff what is similar what you want to merge, there is maybe an attribute in your data set where you can compare them. But it simply means that if you want to compare them at the moment, you have to compare one attribute with all other possible attributes, all other data. So that is a very high complexity. What locality sensitive hashing is doing for you, especially with a min hash analyzer, is that you can put your data in buckets. And buckets what have a similar, let's say, value. The first letters are the same, the pronunciation is the same, or whatever is really working for you. And then later on, you have only to compare the data in one bucket and not the whole data set if you want to find the similar or the same, the duplets of your data. Depending on how many buckets you can define, that can have a huge impact on your performance. It's really a factor from 10 to 100. It really heavily depends on how many buckets you can define. That is, as I said, very useful for entity resolution, anything in this space. And we see more and more of these use cases coming, and also we will see that later on in other talks. That is also helpful for other, let's say, features we are supporting in the future, where you can benefit from these capabilities. The next one is the sharded graph parallelism. So what simply means, if you have a graph traversals what have many start vertices, you can run in parallel the traversals from these different start vertices. So depending on how many threads you're assigning to a query, you can have the same times faster. So let's say 4 threads means 4 times faster the whole query will run. It's a very straightforward, a linear improvement, almost linear. There's anytime a little bit overhead, but all our measurements show clearly it goes in the direction of a linear improvements. Now it's supported by all our different sharded graphs, what we have in ArangoDB. Smart graph, enterprise, and community. This is a big step forward, especially for many use cases where you can benefit from this much better performance. Let me go back to the overview, what I mentioned at the beginning. So I gave you a little bit more in detail about the one what is now grayed out. There's a few left. Let me also give you a quick overview about them. Search highlighting, it's a very straightforward but also very important feature. You're searching for something in the text with our full text search engine, and you're getting back the information where you have found it. So especially in cases where you're using fuzzy search or something similar, it can have a big impact for the usability, what you can provide in your application layer to your users. The M1 ARM support, I mentioned that, so the M1 is getting more and more used by developers, but even the ARM's getting more and more used by cloud providers because they give on the first hand a very good performance. On the other hand, they give also a very good total cost of ownership. So that becomes very interesting for everybody who wants to run ArangoDB on scale or whatever. The nested object search is an addition to our search engine that you can simply search much better in nested JSON objects. So that is simply a clear improvement, not a huge feature, but a highly requested improvement. And I believe that many can really benefit from that. The controllable index creation is also something what simply gives you more control about how indices are created at ArangoDB, how many threads are used, what is the progress, and so on. So that is also was and is highly requested, and we hope that we give now something back to our users and communities, what even makes them more successful with ArangoDB. Before I go to the graph refactoring, I maybe want to say a moment through the rebalancing improvements. So rebalancing in a distributed database is a very important feature, and we invested now with 3.10 a lot to make that even much better and even more insightful with ArangoDB 3.10. We will add even more features with the upcoming releases, especially with the 4.0, what also will come sometimes in the near future. We will speak about that at the end. The parallelism of smart graph, I already mentioned that. So traversal projection simply means when we will build the projections, the result projections for traversals, if it can happen sooner or later, if it's happening as late as possible, simply have a good impact on the performance. And this one is maybe only a small change, but you will see in many of your queries, if you're already using ArangoDB, that this has a very positive impact. The usabilities, optimizer rule management becomes much easier. Feedback progress on what happens on long-running tasks in ArangoDB will be improved. But also let me take a few minutes to speak about the graph refactoring, because I believe that is a very important change. It's not a new feature. The name already saying is we refactored our full graph source code in the last 8 months. And we at the end deleted 60% of the source code. You know, nowadays you cannot really measure a developer on the lines of codes they have written. This was even a very dumb KPI for the whole time. Or maybe better is how many lines they can delete and what is really unused or unnecessary source code. So 60% is clear that we went through everything. We made it much more easier to maintain, and you will also see a big performance improvements. That is very heavily depending on what exactly you're doing with ArangoDB. It can be only a factor of maybe 1.5. It can also a factor of 5 or 10. It really depends heavily what you're doing. It's cannot clearly assigned to a very specific query type, but I think it's an extremely good reason to take the time and give ArangoDB 3.10 a try and have a look at it, because potentially you can benefit heavily from this refactoring. That's very important. But also let's take the last minutes to go a little bit into what happens beyond 22, what happens after our summit, what is the plan for the future. So there will be a 3.11 release in Q1 next year, potentially more in the direction of end of Q1. And then we will have a ArangoDB 4.0 in the direction of the end of next year. So that's not really, we have not yet the concrete release status. You can assume that we are working on that, but that is what will come. 3.11 will take over a few stuff what we missed to put in 3.10, so make a little bit more complete the computed values, what I already mentioned earlier. Also the Arango search will benefit from this new release. And we will also start to build in new stuff what we will have in 4.0, what we already give access early on so that everybody hopefully takes the time and is able to test this stuff so that we have a good foundation for 4.0. And let me also give you then a few ideas what that can be happening with 4.0. There's a few features what we are discussing at the moment. So they are not final, and you will get a little bit better overview what's coming there later on in the next weeks and months. We will have a new cluster management 2.0. We will have an Arango enterprise graph 2.0. I said enterprise will be V1, will be GA now today with 3.10, but we're already planning on the V2 version. What will have performance improvements, what have memory consumption improvements. We're also adding something in the direction of data types. In addition to our JSON approach, it will simply enable you that we do potentially some annotations to a schema definition, what enables us to make sure that we can maybe use some performance improvements, but also there was very often the request that we should support some maybe data types what are not directly supported by JSON, and with that we enable that. There will also potentially a new graph exploration tool. So exploration tool simply goes beyond just visualization of a graph. It's really is a way how you can understand better the graph, what you're using in your environment, what you're using from your data science team, and how you can really understand better your data. That is something where we're working already a quite long time on that, and I'm very thrilled what will coming there later next year. Chain streams also was a feature heavily requested, but also then coming together with cluster 2.0, potentially continuous backups, and even more. So if you have ideas or if you have something in mind, you would say we should really take the time and understand it better, because it's very important for your business, for what you are building. So please let us know. Reach out to us and give us an idea what you are missing in ArangoDB. So as soon as you're doing that, as better we can really understand what you need and also build it in our 4.0 release. As I said, potentially going more to the end of next year when we will have it. Let me quickly summarize what I showed you today. So we have 3.10 GA today. We are enabling you with Enterprise Graph to use a distributed graph in an extremely easy fashion. You have not to think about it, how you distribute the data. You're just writing the data to ArangoDB. It's happened automatically in the background. The query optimizers know what you're using, know how the data is sharded, and really will take advantage of that. So it's really a huge step forward to make it even easier to distribute a graph. We will also have all the features about the new search engine, what is also already heavily used by many people today, and I believe this is also a huge step forward. And all the other features, what will makes it even easier to use ArangoDB, especially also this whole graph-related features, including the graph refactoring, what simply makes everything even faster with ArangoDB as it was today. With that, I want to say thank you for your time today. I hope I gave you a good idea what 3.10 will be, and hopefully give it a try, download it today, and give us your feedback. That is more than appreciated, because that is the only way how we can improve and getting even better.